Howie Rose has a book, put it in a book, which you know very well if you listen to Met broadcasts with Phil Pepe. So Triumph book is the book. Howie, who probably I would say knows more about the Mets than probably anybody you'd find pretty much anywhere. I mean, he's kind of lived the Mets. He's lived the Mets. Well, you've lived the Mets all these years. You know, you go back a long way. You've lived the Mets. I think you got a couple of years on Gary Cohen. Do you have a couple of years?
Just a couple.
Yeah, so I think
he's catching up. Though.
And I think you go back a little farther than he does, and he's pretty good on the Met history too. So, and the two of you have lived through a lot of this stuff. But so, welcome. How are you?
Thanks. Good. Good to see you, Mike.
Now, I know a lot of guys around here have written books. What was your main reason to write a book?
They asked.
That's it. Okay.
No, you know what? I've been asked a couple of times before, and I wasn't either ready or interested in doing it because. When you think about it, if you're going to do something that's even borderline autobiographical, that's about as narcissistic thing as you can do. Right. And I wasn't real comfortable with it. But they said to me, meaning Triumph in Chicago, they said, look, we think you've got a good story to tell. You know, you grew up in the upper deck at Shea Stadium, and you wound up in the broadcast booth there and at Citi Field. So tell the story, tell us some baseball stories, and away we went.
Yeah, and so with Phil Pepe, who obviously has been involved in many, many books, and like I said, Howie's been around. We're about the same age. He's been around the Mets forever, so he remembers, probably remembers their first game, which I do.
Well, I do.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah. Very well, yeah.
Actually, what I remember most about it is going into my parents' room the next morning, because it was a school night. I was 8 years old in April of 1962, and I remember going into my parents' room the next morning as I was getting ready for school, said to my dad, so how'd the Mets do last night? Because I couldn't stay up to watch or listen to the whole game. He said they lost, and I was disappointed. And so, for whatever reason, one game and I was hooked, and that was it.
And obviously, now having a career in the booth. How many years have you been the broadcaster now?
Well, don't hold this against me,
you did Mets Extra forever.
Well, that started in 87. So I kind of got there as part of the Mets broadcast operation in 1987. And you'll note that they won their last World Series the year before I got there. Right. So take what you want from that.
Right. I mean, listen, they won their World Series the year before the station started, as a matter of fact. And the station was promoting sports radio during that playoff in World Series, which was the first time they really promoted it. And the Mets were a very big part of the early part of the station because they were a big team at that time, a very big team.
Now, you've been taking phone calls since the first year, anyway.
Yeah.
Can you remember one figure, and there have been a lot of them in this town, certainly A-Rod most recently, but has anyone received the magnitude and the volume of attention on this radio station that Darryl Strawberry did in those early days?
The only guy who I think has surpassed it is A-Rod.
You think he surpassed it?
Yeah, I think he has now. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, I think he actually has, because his tenure has been so intense and so dramatic. And you know what? He's played a lot. And Straw was in, he was out, he was gone. He stayed and played a long time here, and he's had a lot of success regular season and failures in the postseason and a lot of off-the-field stuff. So I actually think that if I had to pick three, I would say they were Strawberry, they were Ewing, and then would be A-Rod, would be the three as far as – Jeter's been here, obviously, for a very long time, but he has never been a controversial figure. It's all been positive. So, the same thing with Mariano. But A-Rod has obviously been, like Strawberry was, incredibly controversial. But early on, Strawberry was a magnet.
Every call.
Yeah, and that's how A-Rod has been for years now. I mean, in later years, it's been like that. You mentioned A-Rod, it's the whole show. I mean, it always is that way. And, people forget. And I think it's funny because the city has changed so dramatically. We've had such a generation of Yankee enormity since the mid-'90s that people don't realize how much the '80s Mets own this town. I mean, they own this town in an amazing way, almost like the Yankees do now. I mean, to that extent.
That's what I tell people right now who are a little down or disillusioned or frustrated or whatever. And it's not necessarily pitting the Mets against the Yankees, but when people complain about where the Mets are right now, I say it's cyclical. Nothing's forever. Yeah, the Yankees have had a great run, but late 60s, early 70s, right through to the mid-70s until they really took off, meaning the Yankees.
Yep.
And then
Yankees got it back 77, 78 when the Mets swooned.
Right.
Seaver left. You had the Craig Swan years, and then the Mets came back.
Right. And when you say came back, I mean they own this city in the way the Yankees do now. So don't give up hope. Could happen again someday, hopefully soon.
And, you know, it does turn. It is cyclical, but it has changed dramatically. And I think the Yankees' level of dominance now has gotten, you know, they've been in the playoffs so much. And it's so it's really tough. I mean, in the last couple of years have gotten really ugly. I mean, let's be honest. This is if you go from last August through now, this is about as ugly a stretch as you can remember.
Well, you have to hope it's a bottoming out, and it's always a gradual return to prominence. So no one can sit here today and say it's going to turn around completely tomorrow or next month. Hopefully next year things start to trend upward depending upon what happens this year, meaning that if they can get some of these kids up here who figure as part of the future at some point this season, that builds a little bit of hope and momentum going into next year, and you'll hope that they're aggressive enough during the winter so that just helps expedite the process.